The victory ceremony. The grand amphitheater of New Geneva thrummed with anticipation as 10,000 souls gathered to witness the end of humanity's bloodiest interplanetary war. Captain Marcus Thorne stood rigid at attention, his dress uniform bearing the weight of 3 years' worth of medals, each one a testament to survival rather than glory. His weathered hands, scarred from countless battles across the Kepler system, remained steady despite the storm brewing in his chest. The Viridian. War was over. Humanity had won. General Victoria Vaughn's voice boomed across the arena, recounting Marcus's legendary exploits: the rescue of Colony 7, the defense of the mining station Prometheus, the final assault on Viridian Prime that broke their resistance. Each victory felt hollow now, echoing in Marcus's mind like gunshots in an empty chamber. He had seen too much death cause too much suffering to feel anything resembling triumph. "Captain Thorne," the general announced, her smile sharp as a blade, "your service has been exemplary. Today we honor you not just with commendations, but with a gift befitting a true conqueror." The crowd erupted in cheers as the ceremonial doors opened. What emerged made Marcus's blood freeze. She moved with the fluid grace of flowing water, her pale blue skin seeming to capture and reflect the arena's lights like moonlight on a calm sea. Her hair, silver as starlight, cascaded down her back in intricate braids adorned with what Marcus recognized as traditional Viridian mourning beads. But it was her eyes, deep violet pools filled with intelligence, dignity, and barely contained sorrow, that struck him like a physical blow. "Zephyra of the Mist Valleys," the announcer proclaimed, daughter of a Viridian council member, now his, property by right of conquest. The crystalline chains binding her wrists were ceremonial but real, their soft chiming a mockery of wind chimes in her people's sacred groves. She wore a simple white gown that spoke of purity and sacrifice, chosen specifically to emphasize her role as a living trophy. Her feet, bare and pale against the cold metal floor, took each step with measured precision, refusing to stumble despite her obvious fear. Marcus watched in horror as his fellow officers nodded approvingly, their conversations filled with crude speculation about his prize. To them, she was a beautiful object, a symbol of their victory over an entire civilization. But Marcus saw something else entirely: a person, intelligent, proud, and utterly terrified, being paraded like livestock. "Captain?" General Vaughn's voice cut through his reverie. "Will you accept this gift from a grateful military?" The arena fell silent. 20,000 eyes focused on Marcus as he took a step forward, then another. Zephyra's gaze met his, and in that instant he saw not an alien enemy but a fellow being whose world had been torn apart by the same war that had hollowed out his soul. His hands moved to her chains, and the crowd leaned forward expectantly. But instead of leading her away as expected, Marcus's fingers found the release mechanism. The crystalline bonds fell to the floor with a musical crash that echoed through the suddenly silent amphitheater. "I refuse," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly across the arena. "No person, human or Viridian, is property to be given or owned. This woman is free." Zephyra stared at him in shock, her lips parting slightly as she whispered something in her musical native tongue. Then, in accented but clear standard, she spoke her first free words. "No one has ever chosen me, only taken me." The arena erupted in chaos, shouts of outrage, confusion, and scattered applause from unexpected quarters. General Vaughn's face darkened with fury, but Marcus was already moving, taking Zephyra's hand gently and leading her toward the arena's emergency exits. Behind them, the sound of boots on metal announced the pursuit that would define the rest of their lives. The escape. The maintenance corridors beneath New Geneva's military complex had been designed for stealth, not comfort. Marcus pressed his back against the cold metal wall, listening for the echo of pursuit while Zephyra crouched beside him, her breathing shallow but controlled. Emergency klaxons wailed overhead, their red strobes painting the narrow passage in intermittent crimson. "Security sweep level 7, crackled through his abandoned comm unit before he crushed it underfoot. They had perhaps 10 minutes before the search grid tightened around their position. "Can you run?" Marcus whispered, studying Zafira's face in the dim emergency lighting. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched in the fine lines around. Her violet eyes, the way her hands trembled despite her composed exterior. "I have been running for 3 years," she replied softly, her accent lending a musical quality to the grim words, "since the day your people came to my world." Marcus felt the familiar weight of guilt settle on his shoulders. He had been there, on Viridian Prime during the final assault. He remembered the crystal spires of their cities, so beautiful they seemed grown rather than built, crumbling under human artillery. He remembered the refugees fleeing through streets that sparkled like captured starlight, their faces filled with the same terror he now saw in Zafira's eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, knowing how inadequate the words were. "For all of it." She studied him with those penetrating eyes as if seeing past his uniform to the man beneath. "You were a soldier. Soldiers follow orders." That's what I told myself. Marcus checked his chronometer. 8 minutes now. But I should have questioned those orders sooner. The sound of boots echoed from the main corridor, growing closer. Marcus gestured toward a ventilation shaft, its grating already loosened from his earlier reconnaissance of the building's blueprints. He had learned long ago that every victory required an escape route. They crawled through the narrow space in silence, the metal cold against their palms. Behind them, Marcus could hear voices. Security Chief Reeves coordinating search teams, General Vaughn's clipped orders demanding results. They wanted their gift returned, their celebrated hero brought back into line. The shaft opened onto the building's exterior maintenance platform. New Geneva stretched below them, its lights twinkling like an earthbound constellation. Somewhere in that sprawl was the contact Marcus had cultivated during his darker moments. A woman named Dr. Lydia Cross, who ran what the military dismissively called refugee assistance. There, Marcus pointed to a transport hub 3 blocks away. "We can catch a civilian shuttle to the outer districts." Zafira nodded, but as they prepared to descend the emergency ladder, she placed a hand on his arm. "Captain Thorne, Marcus," he corrected. "Just Marcus. Marcus." She seemed to taste the name. "Why did you free me? Your people will consider you a traitor." Marcus paused, remembering a moment from the war's final days. He had been leading a patrol through the ruins of a Viridian settlement when they found a group of children hiding in what remained of their school. The youngest, barely old enough to walk, had looked up at him with those same violet eyes and offered him a small crystal flower, a gesture of inexplicable kindness from someone whose world he had helped to destroy. He had kept that flower, a reminder of what they were really fighting. Not monsters or enemies, but people with families, hopes, and a capacity for grace that shamed him. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "Maybe the first right thing I've done in years." They descended into the city's maze of streets and alleyways, 2 fugitives bound together by conscience and circumstance. Behind them, spotlights swept the military complex as the search intensified. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the faint possibility of redemption. As they reached the transport hub, Marcus felt Zafira's hand slip into his, not from fear, but from trust. For the first time since the war began, he felt something other than guilt. He felt hope. The shuttle lifted off into the night sky, carrying them toward whatever sanctuary they could find in a world that would now consider them both enemies of the state. Hidden sanctuary. The transport shuttle's engines hummed softly as it descended through the pre-dawn mist toward Settlement 47, officially listed as an abandoned mining outpost in the Colorado wastelands. To most databases, it was a forgotten relic of humanity's early expansion efforts. In reality, it was something far more precious, a haven for those displaced by war's cruel machinery. Marcus felt Zafira tense beside him as the settlement came into view. A collection of repurposed mining structures and newly constructed biodomes nestled in a valley that had once been scarred by industrial excavation. Now, carefully tended gardens sprawled between the buildings, their varied colors speaking of plants from dozens of different worlds. "The refuge," Marcus explained quietly. Dr. Cross told me about it during our last conversation. She said it was a place where species doesn't matter, only need. A figure emerged from the main building as their shuttle touched down. A tall, lean man with prematurely gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Tobias Reed moved with the careful gait of someone whose body had been broken by conflict, but whose spirit remained unshaken. He had been a colonial administrator before. The war, Marcus remembered, on one of the first worlds to fall to Viridian expansion decades ago. Captain Thorne, Tobias greeted him with a firm handshake. Dr. Cross sent word you might be coming, and you must be Zephyra. He turned to her with a slight bow, speaking a few words in fluid Viridian that brought tears to her eyes. You know, my language, she whispered. I've had good teachers, Tobias smiled, gesturing toward the settlement. Come, let me show you what we've built here. The refuge defied every expectation Marcus had formed. In the communal dining hall, he watched a human child share breakfast with a young Centaurian, their laughter universal despite their different origins. An elderly Viridian woman worked alongside a human engineer, their hands moving in synchronized precision as they tended to a vertical garden that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. How many live here? Marcus asked as they walked through the settlement's winding paths. 237 souls at last count, Tobias replied. Humans who couldn't stomach what the war became, Viridians who survived the occupation, traders and colonists from a dozen other species caught in the crossfire. We don't ask about the past here, only about what someone needs to heal. Zephyra had grown increasingly quiet as they toured the settlement, her violet eyes taking in every detail. When they paused at a memorial garden where crystal chimes sang softly in the breeze, she finally spoke. These are Viridian memory chimes, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Each one represents someone lost, but the melody they're playing, it's not a song of mourning. It's a song of continuing. Your people have a different relationship with death than we do, said a voice behind them. Marcus turned to see an elderly Viridian woman approaching. Her silver hair braided with the same mourning beads Zephyra wore, but her eyes bright with life. Elder Nisara, Zephyra gasped, dropping to one knee in traditional respect. I thought you were... We heard that the council chambers were destroyed. Yes, Nisara said gently, helping Zephyra to her feet. But not all of us were inside. Some of us were meant to survive, child, to plant seeds for what comes next. Over the following days, Marcus watched Zephyra transform. The tense, frightened woman from the ceremony gradually gave way to someone more recognizable, a scholar, he learned, specializing in what the Viridians called harmony sciences, the study of how different life forms could coexist and strengthen each other. Your people's aggression puzzled us, she explained one evening as they sat by the memorial garden. We couldn't understand why you would destroy what you could instead cultivate. But now I see. You were fighting your own fear, not us. Marcus had spent the week learning about Viridian culture from Elder Nisara and the other refugees. Their entire civilization was built around symbiosis rather than dominance, cooperation instead of competition. They had weapons, certainly, but their first instinct was always to seek balance, to find ways for different elements to strengthen the whole. We could have learned from each other, Marcus said, watching the crystal chimes catch the moonlight. Instead, we almost destroyed both our peoples. Almost, Zephyra repeated, placing her hand over his. But not completely. Here, in this place, something new is growing, something that shows another path is possible. That night, Marcus dreamed not of battlefields but of gardens, vast spaces where human technology and Viridian wisdom combined to create something neither species could have achieved alone. When he woke, he found Zephyra already up, working with Tobias on plans for expanding the settlement's food production systems. For the first time since the war began, Marcus felt like he was part of building something rather than tearing it down. The refuge wasn't just a sanctuary. It was proof that the choice he had made in that arena could grow into something transformative. But outside their peaceful valley, the machinery of two civilizations ground onward, and Marcus knew their respite was temporary. The real test lay ahead. The reckoning. The first sign of trouble came at dawn on a Tuesday, when the perimeter sensors detected military-grade aircraft circling the valley's rim. Marcus was in the hydroponics lab with Zephyra, watching her demonstrate how Viridian bioenhancement techniques could triple crop yields, when Tobias burst through the door, his face grim. "We have company," he announced. 3 dropships, full, military escort. They're not trying to hide their approach. Through the lab's transparent walls, Marcus could see the settlement's residents moving with practiced efficiency, not panic, but the careful preparation of people who had learned that sanctuary was always temporary. Children were guided to the underground shelters while adults secured equipment and gathered at predetermined positions. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer from the growing rumble of approaching engines. 10 minutes, maybe less. Tobias handed him a pulse rifle from the emergency cache. "There's still time to run. The canyon passages, no." Marcus set the weapon aside untouched. "Running only delays the inevitable. Besides, I know who's leading them." The dropships landed in the settlement's main courtyard with military precision, their engines whipping the carefully tended gardens into chaos. As the dust settled, familiar figures emerged from the lead craft. General Vaughn strode forward with her characteristic swagger, flanked by Security Chief Reeves and a full squad of armored troopers. But it was the fourth figure that made Marcus's heart sink. Colonel David Kane, his former mentor and the closest thing to a father he'd ever known. "Stand down, Marcus," Kane called out, his weathered face creased with what might have been genuine sorrow. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The settlement's residents had gathered in a loose circle around the courtyard, but they maintained their positions rather than fleeing. Marcus felt a surge of pride at their quiet courage. These people had found something worth protecting. "Colonel," Marcus replied, stepping forward with Zephyra at his side. "I should have known they'd send you." "You've caused quite a stir, son," Kane said, his voice carrying the weight of long friendship. "Freeing a prisoner of war, deserting your post, consorting with enemy agents. The tribunal is prepared to be lenient if you surrender now." General Vaughn's patience cracked. "Enough sentiment, Colonel. Captain Thorne, you will return our property and report for court-martial. The alien comes with us for proper processing." "Her name is Zephyra," Marcus said firmly. "She's not property and she's not your prisoner anymore." "Actually," Zephyra said, stepping forward with sudden authority, "I believe I'm exactly what you're looking for." A murmur rippled through both the soldiers and settlers. Zephyra's posture had changed, Marcus noticed. Gone was the careful deference of a refugee, replaced by the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "During the war," she continued, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard, "I served as cultural integration specialist for the Viridian Council, what your people would call a diplomatic liaison. I have detailed knowledge of both species, biological and technological capabilities, including information that could prevent the next war." General Vaughn's eyes sharpened with interest. "What kind of information?" "The kind that explains why your victory on Viridian Prime was only the beginning," Elder Nisara said, emerging from the crowd with several other Viridian refugees. "Our people scattered across 40 worlds when your forces arrived. They're regrouping, adapting, learning from our defeat. Another conflict is inevitable unless we try something different," Zephyra finished. "The refuge isn't just a sanctuary, General. It's a proof of concept. Everything we've learned here about interspecies cooperation, about sustainable coexistence, it's all documented, tested, refined." She gestured to the settlement around them. "Your soldiers see a camp of deserters and refugees. I see the foundation of lasting peace between our peoples." Colonel Kane studied the assembled residents with new eyes. "You're talking about formal diplomatic contact. Treaties." "I'm talking about survival," Zephyra replied. "Both species face the same threats: resource depletion, environmental collapse, external enemies we haven't even encountered yet. Separately, we might overcome some of these challenges. Together, we could overcome them all." Marcus watched the interplay of expressions across his former mentor's face. Kane had always been a pragmatist beneath his soldier's exterior, more concerned with protecting humanity than conquering enemies. "The government will never approve," General Vaughn began. "The government doesn't have to know," Kane interrupted quietly. "Not yet. But if there's intelligence that could prevent another war," he looked directly at Marcus. "Son, you always were too smart for your own good." The standoff stretched taut as morning sunlight painted the valley walls gold. Marcus could feel the weight of two civilizations balanced on this moment, on the choices made by people who had seen too much war and death. "1 month," Kane said finally. "I'll tell command that tracking you requires extended reconnaissance. 1 month to prove this. Crazy idea of yours has merit." General Vaughn's protest died as Kane fixed her with his steely gaze. In that look, Marcus saw not just his mentor, but the decorated officer who had survived 3 major conflicts through careful calculation of costs and benefits. 1 month, Marcus agreed, feeling Zafira's hand slip into his. "We'll make it count new." Beginnings 3 months later, the same amphitheater that had witnessed Marcus's defiant act now hosted an event no one could have imagined. Representatives from 12 worlds sat in carefully arranged circles, their varied physiologies accommodated by adaptive seating that itself represented the kind of collaborative innovation emerging from the Refuge Project. Marcus stood at the speaker's podium, no longer wearing military dress but simple civilian clothes that marked him as what he had become, a bridge between worlds. Behind him, a holographic display showed the refuge as it existed now, expanded into a small city of interconnected domes and gardens, home to over 1,000 beings from 6 different species. 6 months ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the amphitheater's acoustic systems, "I made a choice that seemed simple at the time. I freed someone who shouldn't have been enslaved. Today we're here to discuss making a much larger choice, one that will determine whether our species destroy each other or build something unprecedented together." In the front row, Zafira sat with the official Viridian delegation, wearing robes that blended traditional designs with new patterns developed at the refuge. Her transformation from captive to diplomat had been remarkable to witness, but Marcus knew it reflected a deeper truth. Given the chance, most beings preferred creation to destruction. Colonel Kane, now bearing the insignia of Special Diplomatic Envoy, leaned forward in his seat. The past months had changed him too, Marcus noticed. The rigid military bearing had softened into something more adaptable, more open to possibilities beyond warfare. The intelligence provided by Specialist Zafira and the Viridian survivors has proven invaluable. Kane reported to the assembly. "We've identified 17 potential points of conflict between human expansion and Viridian recovery efforts. More importantly, we've found 23 opportunities for mutual benefit." General Vaughn, notably absent from the proceedings, had been reassigned to strategic planning duties after her continued resistance to the diplomatic initiative. Her replacement, General Patricia Morse, had proven far more receptive to unconventional solutions. "The agricultural techniques alone," General Morse added, "could solve food security issues on 8 human colonies while providing the Viridians with mineral resources they need for reconstruction. It's not charity, it's intelligent cooperation." Elder Nisara rose from her place among the Viridian delegation, her voice carrying the musical quality that made even formal pronouncements sound like poetry. "The harmony protocols developed at the refuge have been tested across diverse biomes and social structures. They work not because they eliminate conflict, but because they provide frameworks for resolving differences constructively." Marcus watched as Tobias Reed presented the settlement's most remarkable achievement, the Children's Integration Program. On the holographic display, human and Viridian children played together, learned together, created art and music and stories that neither species could have imagined alone. These children, Marcus realized, would grow up seeing cooperation as natural, conflict as the aberration. "We're not asking anyone to abandon their heritage or identity," Zafira said when called upon to address the assembly. "We're proposing that diversity makes us stronger. The crystal gardens of my people grow more beautifully when planted alongside human-designed support structures. Human technology becomes more elegant when guided by viridian biological principles. Separately, we are survivors. Together, we are pioneers. The formal negotiations would take weeks, Marcus knew. There would be setbacks, political resistance, and the inevitable skeptics who preferred the familiar patterns of dominance and submission. But something fundamental had shifted, a recognition that the old ways led only to mutual destruction. As the session broke for recess, Marcus found himself standing with Zephyra on the amphitheater's observation deck, looking out over New Geneva's sprawling cityscape. The same city that had cheered his victory now hosted the most ambitious diplomatic initiative in human history. "Do you think it will work?" she asked, her violet eyes reflecting the afternoon sunlight. Marcus considered the question carefully. In the distance, he could see a construction site where the first official interspecies cultural center was taking shape, designed jointly by human architects and viridian bioengineers. Children from both species worked alongside the construction crews, their laughter carrying on the wind. "I think," he said finally, "that we've already proved it works. Everything else is just making it official." Zephyra smiled, an expression that transformed her entire face. "In my language, we have a saying, the first flower of spring doesn't create the season. It announces that the season has already begun." Marcus nodded, understanding. The refuge hadn't been the beginning of change. It had been proof that change was already possible, already happening wherever beings chose compassion over conquest, cooperation over domination. Below them, delegates from different worlds mingled. In the amphitheater's gardens, their conversations animated by possibility, rather than suspicion. Among them, Marcus spotted some of the refuge's original residents, now serving as advisors, translators, and living examples of what interspecies cooperation could achieve. "Whatever comes next," Marcus said, taking Zephyra's hand in his, "we'll face it together, all of us." The future stretched ahead like an unwritten story, full of challenges and opportunities that no single species could navigate alone. But for the first time since the war began, that future held promise instead of just survival. In choosing compassion over ownership, Marcus had freed more than one person. He had helped free two entire civilizations from the prison of perpetual conflict, opening doors to possibilities neither had dared imagine alone. The real victory, he realized, was just beginning.